It was early November, the kind of cold morning when the swamp mist curled low and thick, hiding everything in a silver haze. The father, a rugged man in his 40s, loaded his small boat with rifles, decoys, and a thermos of coffee while his son, only 12, clutched his hunting jacket tightly against the biting air. Duck hunting trips were their tradition, something they had done together every season since the boy could remember. To them, this trip was just another adventure, another memory waiting to be made. They waved goodbye to the family and promised to be back by sundown. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. By afternoon, the sky had darkened, and a storm rolled quietly over the wetlands. The swamp grew still, its waters black and heavy, swallowing every sound except the occasional crack of distant thunder. Hours passed, and when the family expected to hear the roar of their truck pulling back into the driveway, silence remained. Calls to the father's phone went unanswered. Messages piled up without reply. At first, everyone thought they had just stayed out longer than expected, but when midnight came and the driveway remained empty, unease turned into fear. The next morning, local authorities were called. A search party set out, their boots sinking deep into the mud, flashlights cutting through the heavy fog. They traced the father's truck parked by the riverbank, its doors locked, the inside spotless as though untouched. Nearby, a trail of boot prints led into the marsh. One pair was large, heavy-set, the father's, the other, smaller and lighter, the boy's. But midway, the tracks simply stopped, as if they had vanished into thin air. No return prints, no signs of struggle, nothing but an eerie silence that seemed to grow heavier the deeper they searched. By the third day, word spread across town. Volunteers, fishermen, and even hunters who knew the swamp like the back of their hands joined in. Helicopters scoured the waters from above, while search dogs barked wildly at the edges of the reeds, refusing to step further in. Divers combed beneath the lily pads and moss, surfacing only with handfuls of weeds. The swamp gave back nothing. Not a boat, not a rifle, not a trace of clothing. The only thing that lingered in the air was the unsettling sense that something was watching them from the shadows. As days stretched into weeks, theories began to swirl. Some believed the boat must have overturned in the storm and the swamp swallowed them whole. Others whispered of something darker, an unseen predator lurking beneath the water. But for the mother, none of those answers mattered. All she knew was that her husband and her son had walked into the swamp that morning, and somehow, without a single trace, they never walked back out. The official search began with urgency. But from the very first moment, rescuers realized this would not be an ordinary missing person case. The swamp stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of twisting waterways, dense vegetation, and deep pools of black water that could hide almost anything. Search boats glided slowly across the surface, their motors cutting through the silence, while rescue teams used long poles to probe beneath the surface. But every effort felt futile. The swamp seemed to swallow not only objects but time itself, offering no clues, no traces, nothing to hold on to. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning the marshland with thermal imaging cameras, hoping for a heat signature. All they captured was the restless movement of animals, alligators drifting silently beneath the surface, flocks of birds rising and scattering into the fog. Search dogs were brought in next, their noses twitching, tails stiff as they sniffed the air around the father's parked truck. At first, they caught a scent leading into the swamp, but each time, they stopped abruptly near the water's edge, whining, refusing to go farther. Experienced handlers admitted it was rare for trained dogs to react with such hesitation. As days turned into a week, frustration and fear grew among the searchers. They expanded their efforts, dragging the swamp with nets and hooks, hoping to snag a piece of clothing, a boot, anything at all. But each attempt came up empty, save for tangled reeds and rotting branches. Some divers who entered the water swore they felt the unsettling sensation of something moving below them, too large, too close, but when they surfaced, there was nothing but ripples on the water. Whispers spread quickly. Maybe the swamp itself didn't want to give the father and son back? Meanwhile, volunteers from nearby towns began sharing their own unease. One fisherman claimed he saw a small boat drifting far into the marsh, long after the search had supposedly cleared the area, but when crews arrived, nothing was there. Another swore he heard gunshots echoing at dusk, though no one was hunting in the area. Each strange report only deepened the mystery, leaving searchers wondering if they were chasing ghosts rather than missing people. By the end of the second week, officials reluctantly scaled back the operation. The swamp had offered no bodies, no weapons, no boat, only silence. The family begged them not to stop, but authorities admitted there was nothing more they could do without new evidence. The disappearance was beginning to feel less like an accident and more like something unexplainable. The father and son had walked into the swamp, but no one could understand why not a single trace of them remained. It wasn't long after the official search ended that the swamp began whispering its own unsettling stories. Locals who spent their lives fishing and trapping in those waters started coming forward with chilling claims. One man, a seasoned fisherman, swore that just before dawn he heard the faint sound of a child laughing somewhere deep in the mist. At first, he thought it was an echo from the nearby town, but the laughter grew louder, sharpened till it ended abruptly with the unmistakable sound of a splash. When he called out, no one answered. The swamp returned to silence, as if mocking him for even asking. Hunters soon reported their own encounters. While waiting in their blinds, several claimed they heard gunshots ring out in the distance, shots that echoed strangely, fading in and out like they were carried on shifting winds. Yet when authorities checked, no hunters had registered their presence in the swamp that day. More disturbing, some described hearing the cries of a boy calling Dad, followed by nothing but the rustle of reeds. Each time, the swamp appeared empty, no footprints, no boats, nothing to explain the voices. Others swore they saw figures. A young couple kayaking late one evening spotted what they believed was a boy standing near the edge of the water, staring at them. He was pale, still, and silent. But when they blinked, he was gone. No splash, no ripples in the water, no footprints leading away. Another man swore he saw a man in a camouflage jacket drifting in a boat without oars, staring blankly ahead. By the time rescuers checked the area, there was only open water covered with mist. Word of these encounters spread fast, fueling local legends. Old-timers whispered that the swamp was cursed, a place where the souls of the lost never left. Some even said the father and son hadn't simply vanished, but had become part of the swamp itself, trapped between worlds. Their voices carried on the wind. Skeptics, of course, dismissed the stories as fear and imagination running wild. But those who had heard the voices or seen the figures refused to step foot in the swamp again. Each new sighting made the mystery grow darker. Was it grief driving people to hallucinate? Was the swamp playing tricks on those who dared enter it? Or was something far more sinister unfolding beneath the moss and mist? Whatever the truth was, one thing became undeniable. The swamp wasn't silent anymore, it was speaking, and no one wanted to listen too closely. Back at home, the father's wife, now left alone with nothing but questions, clung to the fragile hope that her husband and son were still alive. She refused to accept the official explanation that they had drowned in the swamp. Every morning, she would glance at the empty chairs at the kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing down like a weight she couldn't escape. The boy's school books still lay open on his desk, his favorite sneakers by the door, waiting, as if he might walk in at any moment. The father's hunting jacket still hung on the back of the chair, carrying the faint scent of gun oil and swamp water. To her, these were not relics of the dead but reminders that they might return. She developed a ritual. Every year, on the exact day of their disappearance, she drove to the swamp with a bouquet of wildflowers, the same ones her son used to pick for her in the backyard. She would place them gently at the water's edge, whispering prayers into the wind. Sometimes, she swore she could hear faint ripples behind her, as though something or someone was listening. At night, she dreamed of her son calling out to her, his voice echoing across dark water, always just out of reach. Neighbors noticed the toll it was taking on her. Once a warm and lively woman, she had grown pale, her eyes tired from sleepless nights spent staring at the empty driveway. Friends urged her to move on, to accept that her family was gone, but she couldn't. She often told them, "I can't mourn someone when I don't have proof they're dead." In her mind, the absence of bodies meant the absence of closure. And deep inside, a part of her feared the truth wasn't as simple as an accident. Her loneliness was only deepened by the strange experiences she had at the swamp. On one visit, as she laid flowers on the muddy shore, she felt the hair on her arms rise. The air grew unnaturally still. In the reeds behind her, she heard what sounded like a twig snapping. Slowly, she turned, expecting to see another mourner, a hunter, anyone. But no one was there. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as though eyes hidden in the thickets were following her every move. She left quickly that day, her hands trembling on the steering wheel as she drove away. Over time, the house itself began to feel haunted, not by spirits, but by memory. The boy's laughter seemed to echo faintly in the hallway, and the creak of the father's boots still rang in her mind. Some nights, she thought she heard the faint sound of dripping water in the living room, though nothing was there. The family's agony wasn't just the loss, it was the cruel uncertainty, the unanswered questions that gnawed at her every waking moment. For her, the swamp wasn't just the place they vanished, it was the place that held her family hostage, refusing to give them back. 2 years had passed since the father and son vanished, and most of the town had tried to move on. The official search had long been abandoned, but the swamp still carried whispers of the tragedy. It was during this quiet period that a local diver, an experienced man who often explored the marshes for lost relics, sunken boats, and discarded fishing gear, decided to investigate the area on his own. He had no connection to the family, but curiosity and the lure of the unknown pulled him into the same waters where dozens had searched before and found nothing. On his 3rd day of diving, the swamp began to feel heavier, darker. Visibility was nearly zero. Every move stirred up clouds of silt that clung to his mask. His flashlight cut through only a few feet of the black water, revealing tangled reeds, broken branches, and the eerie stillness of a place that seemed untouched by time. He had almost decided to turn back when his light caught something rusted and half buried under a thick layer of algae. He swam closer, his heart racing, realizing he had stumbled upon something far more significant than old debris. It was a small boat. Its frame was warped, the paint chipped away, its wooden planks softened by years of water damage. The diver brushed away the moss, uncovering its shape fully, and felt a chill creep down his spine. This wasn't just any boat, it matched the description of the one the father had taken 2 years earlier. Lodged against the roots of a cypress tree, it looked as though it had been deliberately hidden, tucked away where no casual searcher would ever find it. Inside the boat, the diver found 2 life jackets, their straps tangled like they had been hastily pulled off or caught in a struggle. He lifted one carefully, the fabric crumbling at the edges. It was impossible not to imagine the boy's small hands fastening the buckles on the morning of their trip. But what froze him completely wasn't the boat or the life jackets, it was the waterproof bag wedged between the seats. Covered in muck, yet still sealed tight. With trembling hands, he pulled it free, bubbles escaping from beneath the algae, as if the swamp itself resisted giving it up. The diver surfaced with the bag clutched tightly to his chest, his breathing frantic. He knew immediately that this was the first real piece of evidence in the disappearance, the first object to surface from the swamp's suffocating silence. Whatever was inside, he realized, could hold the answers everyone had been searching for, answers that had been buried in darkness for 2 long years. But he couldn't shake the feeling that bringing it to the surface meant disturbing something that was never meant to be found. When the diver handed the waterproof bag over to authorities, it was treated with the utmost care. The mud-caked zipper was pried open, and inside they discovered items that made the air in the room grow heavy. There were a few personal belongings, an old pocket knife, some soggy maps of the swamp, and a half-empty box of ammunition. But the most chilling discovery was a small black GoPro camera. Its casing was scratched and battered, but miraculously, it had survived 2 years underwater. That single object instantly shifted the investigation from speculation to a horrifying new possibility. Maybe the father and son's final moments had been captured. The camera was sent off to specialists who worked tirelessly to recover the footage. Days later, when the files were finally extracted, investigators gathered in a dimly lit room to watch. The video began, innocently enough. It showed the father and son in the boat, laughing, setting up decoys, and chatting casually. The boy's voice was bright, filled with excitement, while the father smiled, adjusting his rifle and giving instructions. It seemed like any other hunting trip until the atmosphere shifted. In the background, the water grew strangely still, the reeds swaying in a wind that wasn't there. The boy was the first to notice. The footage showed him suddenly stopping mid-sentence, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Dad, what's that?" his small voice asked, tinged with confusion. The father turned, the camera wobbling as he lowered his rifle. His tone changed immediately, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't move." The lens trembled as though the person holding it had started shaking. From the corner of the frame, something moved in the water, a shadow, long and unnatural, gliding just beneath the surface. The next moments were chaos. The camera jolted violently as water splashed against the boat. The father shouted something, muffled by the roar of rushing water, his voice desperate, commanding his son to stay low. The boy screamed, the sound raw and terrified, before the frame blurred in frantic motion. For a split second, The footage caught the glint of something massive breaking the surface, but it was too distorted to identify. Then, just as suddenly, the screen went black. No ending, no explanation, only silence. When the video finished, the room was silent. Investigators replayed it again and again, searching for clarity, but the footage only raised more questions than answers. Was it an alligator, a submerged log, or something else entirely? The drag marks found near the boat by the diver seemed to suggest something powerful had pulled the vessel down. But what chilled everyone most wasn't what they was what they heard. The boy's final scream echoed in the room long after the footage ended. A sound no one who watched would ever forget. The diver's discovery and the recovered footage should have brought closure. But instead, it opened a door to even darker speculation. Experts examined the drag marks at the bottom of the swamp, and their findings were unsettling. These weren't the usual grooves left behind by an overturned boat or a struggling swimmer. The marks were wide, deep, and disturbingly if something had gripped the boat and dragged it beneath the muck. Investigators struggled to explain how natural forces alone could have left such scars in the earth. The swamp, it seemed, was hiding something powerful and intentional. Whispers began spreading once again, louder this time. Some pointed to the possibility of a massive alligator, larger than any recorded in the region, capable of capsizing a boat and dragging it down. But seasoned hunters and swamp dwellers dismissed that theory, insisting that even the biggest gators wouldn't behave this way. Others suggested the water was home to something older, a creature of legend that had haunted Cajun folklore for generations. Whatever the explanation, no scientific answer could silence the unease that settled over the town. The family, still broken and searching for meaning, found themselves haunted not only by grief but also by the footage itself. The mother couldn't bring herself to watch the video in its entirety, but she asked investigators to describe what they saw. When they mentioned the shadow moving beneath the water, she went pale. She claimed her husband had always spoken about strange shapes in the swamp, things he couldn't explain during his hunts. He used to joke that the swamp kept secrets. Now, she wondered if his jokes had been warnings she hadn't taken seriously. As more people visited the area out of morbid curiosity, strange incidents continued. Campers reported hearing splashes at night, though the water was perfectly still by daybreak. Others claimed they saw a flicker of light beneath the surface, as though something metallic or perhaps reflective eyes were watching from below. Each story added another layer to the mystery, making the swamp feel less like a place of nature and more like a living entity. One that decided who entered and who never returned. The official records, however, remained cold and clinical. Cause of disappearance undetermined. That line haunted everyone who had followed the case from the beginning. 2 years, countless hours of searching, a sunken boat, tangled life jackets, and a camera filled with screams, and yet no bodies, no proof, no certainty. The unanswered question remained, echoing across the waters, like the boy's final cry. What really happened that day in the swamp? And so, the swamp still holds its silence. The boat was found, the camera recovered, and the screams forever recorded, yet the father and son remain lost to this day. No bodies, no final proof, shadows in the water, and whispers in the mist. Some believe it was nature's wrath, others say it was something older. Something that doesn't belong in this world at all. But one truth remains unshakable. The swamp does not give back what it takes. To this day, locals avoid that stretch of water, especially at night, when the fog creeps low and the air grows still. Fishermen swear they sometimes hear laughter in the distance, followed by a single gunshot that vanishes into silence. The question still lingers, haunting every soul who dares to wonder, what did the father and son really see in the swamp that morning? And perhaps more chilling, is it still there, waiting, beneath the black water, for its next victim?
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.